A simple woman in a plain white dress steps into the prestigious Royal Gambit Chess Club, drawing curious and judgmental stares. Victor Sterling, the club champion, challenges her to a match, intending to humiliate her for entertainment. The crowd gathers, eager to witness another victim of Victor's cruelty. But when Grace Sullivan moves her first piece, the smug smile fades from Victor's face. With each calculated move, she dismantles his defenses, revealing a brilliant mind behind her modest appearance. What the arrogant chess master and his elite audience didn't know was that the woman they mocked was once a chess prodigy who had walked away from fame. Now they would learn a powerful lesson about looking beyond appearances, as Grace proves that true mastery doesn't require pretension or status. The Royal Gambit Chess Club stood like a fortress of intellectual elitism on Fifth Avenue, its marble steps and ornate wooden doors designed to impress and intimidate. Inside, the rich mahogany furniture, crystal chandeliers, and the persistent scent of expensive cologne created an atmosphere of exclusivity that had defined the club since 1920. On this particular Wednesday evening, the club hummed with its usual activity. Men in tailored suits and women in designer dresses moved chess pieces with practiced precision, their voices never rising above a cultured murmur. Victor Sterling sat at his usual table, his pale blue eyes scanning the room like a king surveying his kingdom. At 42, Victor was the club's reigning champion, a title he guarded with the ferocity of a lion protecting its pride. His salt and pepper hair and immaculately pressed navy suit spoke of money and privilege, as did the custom platinum cufflinks shaped like chess knights that adorned his wrists. Another boring evening, he sighed to Charles Westwood, a fellow member who stood beside him. No one worth playing these days. Charles chuckled. Perhaps you've simply outgrown the competition. Victor smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps. The club's heavy double doors swung open, momentarily flooding the dimly lit room with the harsh glow of street lights. In walked a woman who seemed oddly out of place in the rarefied atmosphere of the Royal Gambit. Grace Sullivan paused just inside the entrance, her hazel eyes taking in the scene before her. At 35, she had the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in her own skin. Her simple white button-up dress, cinched at the waist with a worn leather belt, was a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical bun, not a strand out of place, yet without the styled perfection that characterized the other women present. "May I help you?" The receptionist's tone carried a barely concealed suggestion that Grace had taken a wrong turn somewhere. "I'm looking for Joseph Matthews," Grace replied, her voice steady and clear. "He asked me to meet him here at 8. The receptionist's perfectly arched eyebrows rose slightly. "Dr. Matthews is running late. He called to say he's been delayed at the university. You're welcome to wait, though I'm not sure." She trailed off, eyeing Grace's attire with thinly veiled disapproval. "Thank you. I'll wait." Grace moved past the reception desk, ignoring the curious glances that followed her. She found an empty chair near the corner of the main playing area and sat down, her posture relaxed yet dignified. Her eyes roamed over the various games in progress, studying moves and positions with a quiet intensity that went unnoticed by most. Victor Sterling, however, had noticed the newcomer immediately. Something about the way she observed the games with focused attention, rather than the casual interest of a novice, piqued his curiosity. "Who's that?" he asked Charles, nodding toward Grace. Charles shrugged. "No idea. Clearly doesn't belong here. Probably someone's housekeeper or a lost tourist." Victor's lips curled into a smile that held no warmth. "She's watching the games like she understands them." "Doubtful," Charles scoffed. "Probably just fascinated by the shiny pieces." Victor chuckled, but his eyes remained fixed on Grace. There was something about her, a quiet dignity perhaps, that irritated him. In his world, people like her knew their place and didn't venture into spaces like the Royal Gambit unless they were serving drinks or cleaning floors. "I think," Victor said, slowly rising from his seat, "that we might have found some entertainment for the evening after all." Charles followed his gaze and smiled. "Oh, this should be good." Victor made his way across the room, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Members noticed his trajectory and whispered among themselves. Victor approaching an outsider was unusual enough to warrant attention. Grace remained focused on a nearby match, seemingly oblivious to the approaching storm. The game she watched was nearing its conclusion. A queenside attack that would lead to checkmate in 5 moves, though the defending player hadn't realized it yet. "Enjoying the view?" Victor's voice cut through her concentration. Grace looked up, her expression neutral. Yes, thank you. You play? The question carried a hint of mockery. A little, she replied, her tone giving nothing away. Victor's smile widened. A little, he repeated, as if savoring a private joke. How charming. By now, a small crowd had gathered, curious about Victor's interest in this plainly dressed woman who had wandered into their sanctuary. I'm Victor Sterling, he announced, watching for the recognition his name usually evoked. Club champion for the past 7 years. Grace Sullivan, she replied simply, offering neither congratulations nor impression. Victor's smile faltered momentarily before returning with renewed condescension. Well, Grace Sullivan, since you enjoy watching, perhaps you'd care to play a game. I so rarely get the opportunity to introduce newcomers to the finer points of chess. The invitation dripped with false courtesy. Around them, club members exchanged knowing looks. Victor's introductions were legendary, quick, brutal dismantlings that left opponents embarrassed and the audience entertained. That's very kind, Grace said, but I'm waiting for someone. Oh, it won't take long, Victor insisted, his voice hardening slightly. Just a friendly game to pass the time. The crowd had grown larger. Victor's challenges were a form of theater at the Royal Gambit, a reminder of the hierarchy that existed within these walls. Grace hesitated, her eyes scanning the room. The receptionist was watching with barely concealed amusement. Several members had abandoned their games to witness what promised to be an entertaining humiliation. I'd really rather not, Grace said firmly. Victor's expression darkened. Surely you're not afraid of a little chess game. You said you play. I said I play a little, Grace corrected him. There's a difference. A soft ripple of laughter spread through the onlookers. Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. One game, he pressed. Unless you find our club beneath your abilities. The sarcasm in his voice was unmistakable. Grace sighed, recognizing the corner she was being pushed into. Refusing further would only create more of a scene. Very well, Mr. Sterling. One game. Victor's triumphant smile returned as he gestured toward a vacant table in the center of the room. Excellent. Shall we? As Grace rose to follow him, the club's main doors opened again. Dr. Joseph Matthews, a distinguished man in his 70s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, entered and paused, taking in the scene before him. Grace, he called out, moving quickly toward her. I see you've met some of our members. Joseph. Grace's face brightened with genuine warmth. Yes, Mr. Sterling has challenged me to a game while I waited. Joseph's eyes widened slightly as he looked between Grace and Victor. Has he indeed? There was a note of concern in his voice, but also something else, a glimmer of anticipation. Just a friendly match, Victor said smoothly. To welcome your friend to our club. Joseph hesitated, then nodded slowly. Well then, this should be interesting. He turned to Grace. Do you feel up to it? We could leave if you prefer. Grace held his gaze for a moment, then shook her head. It's just one game, Joseph. Very well, Joseph said, taking a step back to join the growing audience. Just remember what I taught you. Victor's eyebrows shot up at this exchange, but he said nothing as he guided Grace to the table. The chess table at the center of the room stood under the direct glow of a crystal chandelier, its marble surface gleaming under the light. The chess pieces, hand-carved from Italian alabaster and onyx, were arranged in perfect formation, soldiers awaiting commands from their generals. Victor gestured for Grace to take the seat facing the white pieces. Ladies first, he said with exaggerated courtesy. Grace sat down, her movements unhurried. She adjusted her chair slightly, then ran her fingers lightly over the white king, feeling its smooth contours. There was familiarity in her touch that didn't escape Joseph's notice. The crowd had grown to include nearly everyone present in the club that evening. They formed a circle around the table, their expectations clear. They had come to witness a slaughter, not a match. Standard tournament rules? Grace asked, her voice even. Victor's eyebrows lifted in mild surprise. You're familiar with tournament play. As I said, I play a little. A few chuckles rippled through the audience. Victor nodded, settling into his chair with the confidence of a man who has never known defeat in this room. Tournament rules it is. Clock set to 20 minutes each. He gestured to Charles, who stepped forward with a professional chess clock and set it on the table. Grace adjusted the white pieces, aligning them with precision. Her hands moved with practiced ease, but few in the audience noticed this detail, distracted as they were by the anticipation of watching Victor's usual performance. You know, Victor said conversationally as he arranged his black pieces. I usually give newcomers some advantage. A piece handicap, perhaps? Would you like that? The question was designed to sting, to establish dominance before the first move was even made. Several members smirked, expecting Grace to either accept the handicap or bristle at the insult. Instead, she simply shook her head. That won't be necessary, thank you. Victor shrugged. As you wish. The chess clock was set. The board was ready. All eyes were on Grace as she contemplated her opening move. The weight of expectation hung heavy in the air, mingled with the scent of expensive perfume and silent judgment. In that moment, something shifted in Grace's demeanor, subtle, but unmistakable to those paying close attention. Her shoulders squared ever so slightly. Her gaze, when it met Victor's, held a clarity and focus that hadn't been there before. Joseph Matthews stood at the edge of the circle, his expression inscrutable save for the slightest hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth. Grace reached forward and moved her pawn to a4, a standard opening, but executed with a fluidity that spoke of countless repetitions. Victor responded quickly with his knight to f6, an unconventional but aggressive counter. Grace paused, studying the board. The crowd watched, some already losing interest in what they assumed would be a quick and predictable game. Then she moved her knight to c3, and something in the deliberate precision of her movement caused Victor to look up from the board to her face. An interesting choice, he remarked, trying to maintain his air of superiority. Every choice in chess should be interesting, Grace replied, her voice taking on a new depth. Otherwise, why play? Victor's eyes narrowed slightly as he considered his next move. He pushed his pawn to a5, attempting to control the center. Without hesitation, Grace moved her bishop to b5, pinning Victor's knight against his king. A murmur rippled through the spectators. The move was aggressive, strategic, and undeniably skilled. Victor stared at the board, the beginning of a frown forming between his brows. This was not proceeding as he had anticipated. Your mentor has taught you some basics, I see, he said, attempting to regain psychological control. Grace didn't respond, her focus entirely on the game before her. The match had begun in earnest, and the audience that had gathered for a quick execution now found themselves witnessing what appeared to be the opening moves of a genuine contest. 20 minutes into the game, the atmosphere in the room had transformed. What began as a spectacle of anticipated humiliation had evolved into a match of unexpected intensity. The hushed whispers that circulated through the audience carried notes of surprise and grudging admiration. Victor's confident smile had long since disappeared, replaced by the intense concentration of a man facing a worthy opponent. His forehead glistened with a light sheen of perspiration as he contemplated his next move. The board before them told the story of a battle where neither player yielded easily. Grace had sacrificed a knight to gain positional advantage, a bold strategy that spoke of advanced understanding. Victor had countered skillfully, but found himself continuously responding to her initiatives rather than creating his own. Check, Grace said quietly, moving her bishop diagonally across the board. Victor shifted his king out of danger, his movements less fluid than before. A muscle in his jaw twitched, a tell that Joseph recognized from years of observing players under pressure. You've played before, Victor stated, no longer a question but an accusation. Grace lifted her eyes from the board briefly. I mentioned that I play a little. He repeated her words with obvious sarcasm. This isn't playing a little, Miss Sullivan. Grace returned her attention to the board without responding. Her next move advanced a pawn, seemingly innocuous, but strategically forcing Victor's bishop into a retreating position. The clock ticked. Victor had used 15 of his 20 minutes, while Grace had used only 8. Time pressure began to weigh on him, adding to the psychological strain. Charles Westwood leaned toward another member, whispering, "Where did she learn to play like that?" The question rippled through the gathered crowd. Joseph Matthews stood with arms crossed, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When the club president approached him with raised eyebrows, Joseph simply shrugged. Some people are naturally gifted, he said loud enough for those nearby to hear. Victor's next move betrayed his growing frustration, an aggressive push that left a weakness in his defense. Grace noted it immediately, her expression unchanging as she capitalized on the error, sliding her rook into a threatening position. Check, she said again. Victor moved his king to safety, but the cost was high, his position deteriorating further. 3 moves later, Victor stared at the board in disbelief. His king was trapped with no legal moves remaining. Checkmate, Grace announced softly. The room fell silent, the collective breath of the audience held in stunned disbelief. Victor Sterling, 7-time club champion, had been defeated in 27 moves by a woman no one recognized, dressed in a simple white dress with a worn leather belt. The silence that engulfed the room was profound, broken only by the soft sound of Grace resetting her pieces to their original positions. Victor remained frozen, staring at the board as if expecting the pieces to rearrange themselves into a less damning configuration. "That was," he began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain, unexpected. Grace looked up, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "Would you like another game, Mr. Sterling? I believe the traditional response to a defeat is to offer congratulations and request a rematch." Her words, delivered without malice but with unmistakable confidence, sent a ripple of reactions through the crowd. Some gasped softly, others exchanged wide-eyed glances, and a few, particularly those who had experienced Victor's arrogance firsthand, suppressed smiles. Victor's face flushed. He glanced around, suddenly aware of being the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. The hunter had become the hunted, the entertainer now the entertainment. Yes, of course," he managed, straightening his posture. "A rematch. Though perhaps we should make it interesting. A wager, perhaps?" Grace's expression cooled. "I don't play for money, Mr. Sterling." "Not money," he clarified quickly, information. "If I win, you tell us who you really are, and where you learned to play like that. And if you win—" He paused, realizing he had nothing to offer that she seemed to want. "If I win," Grace continued for him, "you'll stop challenging unsuspecting visitors to this club for your entertainment." Victor blinked, caught off guard by her awareness of his usual tactics. Behind Grace, Joseph couldn't suppress a proud smile. "Deal," Victor agreed, reaching for the black pieces again. "But I'll take white this time." As they reset the board, the crowd grew larger. Word had spread throughout the club, drawing members from the bar and reading rooms. Even the staff paused in their duties, finding excuses to linger near the match. "She beat Victor," whispered a newcomer to the gathering. "Impossible," replied another. "I saw it with my own eyes." The rematch began with Victor playing aggressively from the start, determined to establish dominance quickly and erase the memory of his defeat. Grace responded with calm precision, her moves revealing a deep understanding of classical strategy. 10 moves in, club member Winston Davis leaned toward Joseph. "She's extraordinary. Where did you find her?" Joseph smiled enigmatically. "I didn't find Grace. She was my student many years ago, before she changed paths." "Student? She could be teaching here." Joseph nodded. Indeed she could. On the board, the battle intensified. Victor sacrificed a pawn for initiative, but Grace's counterattack revealed the move as premature. Gradually, inexorably, the position shifted in her favor once again. The whispers grew louder. The audience was no longer watching for Victor's triumph, but witnessing Grace's mastery unfold. The rematch concluded even more decisively than the first game. Victor's final desperate attempt to salvage a draw was met with a combination so elegant that several members murmured in appreciation. "Checkmate in 3, Grace announced quietly. Victor stared at the board, then slowly tipped his king over in resignation, unable to deny the inevitable. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a mixture of frustration and genuine curiosity. Grace glanced at Joseph, who gave her a slight nod of encouragement. "Just someone who loves chess, Mr. Sterling," she replied, rising from her seat. "And now, if you'll excuse me, Joseph and I have dinner plans." But Victor wasn't prepared to let her leave so easily. "Wait," he insisted, standing up. "I've played grandmasters who couldn't dismantle a position like you just did. You're not just someone who loves chess." The room had grown silent again, all eyes on Grace. Joseph stepped forward. "Perhaps I can shed some light," he offered, though I suspect a few of our older members might already recognize Grace Sullivan, formerly Grace Bennett. A collective gasp rose from several gray-haired members in the back. "The prodigy," someone exclaimed. "The one who disappeared before the international championship." Joseph nodded. 20 years ago, Grace was the most promising young player I'd ever coached. She qualified for the international championship at 15. Victor's expression transformed as recognition dawned. "Bennett, I studied your matches. They're in textbooks now. But you vanished before the finals. Everyone thought many things," Grace interrupted gently, "none of which matter now." She turned to Joseph. "Shall we?" Joseph offered his arm. "Your performance hasn't suffered from lack of tournament play, he observed as they walked toward the exit. Grace smiled. I never stopped playing, Joseph. I just stopped playing for an audience. The club members parted before them, faces reflecting newfound respect as they passed. As Grace and Joseph reached the doors, Victor called out, Miss Sullivan, Miss Bennett, wait. They paused, turning to find Victor approaching, his earlier arrogance replaced by something resembling humility. I owe you an apology, he said, the words clearly unfamiliar on his tongue. I was unprofessional and unkind. Grace regarded him thoughtfully. Apology accepted, Mr. Sterling. Would you consider coming back? Perhaps giving a lecture or demonstration. The club would benefit enormously from your insights. Joseph watched Grace carefully, noting the brief flash of consideration in her eyes before she shook her head. I appreciate the offer, but no. I have a full life teaching elementary school mathematics. Chess is my sanctuary, not my profession. Victor looked genuinely disappointed. At least tell me, why did you walk away? You could have been world champion. Grace smiled, a genuine expression that softened her features. I discovered that I valued my love for the game more than I valued winning. The pressure was changing chess from a passion into an obligation. She glanced around at the opulent surroundings. There's beauty in chess played for the right reasons, Mr. Sterling. When it becomes about status or humiliating others, that beauty fades. Victor nodded slowly, absorbing her words. Your wager, Grace reminded him gently. No more ambushing unsuspecting visitors. You have my word, Victor replied, extending his hand. Grace shook it firmly, then turned to leave with Joseph. As the doors closed behind them, the murmur of conversation resumed inside the club, but something had changed. At tables throughout the room, members replayed the game moves from memory, discussing strategies and combinations with renewed enthusiasm. And Victor Sterling returned to his usual table, pulled out a notebook, and began to write. Not to record another victory, but to preserve the lessons learned from an unexpected teacher in a simple white dress. If Grace's story touched your heart today, remember that brilliance often hides in the most unassuming places. True mastery isn't about showing off. It's about the quiet dedication that transforms passion into excellence. Has someone ever underestimated you, only to regret it later? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this tale of hidden talent and deserved respect. Let us know where you're watching from. Our stories reach across America, bringing powerful messages to every corner of the country. Until next time, remember, judge less, discover more.